How do you actually change your behavior, your actions, and your results? Now, I have books I revere that get into the science and mechanics of change. I think they're brilliant. They are brilliant. However, I don't know tons of people who say, hey, that information truly helped me change. So today I bring you a concept I think you're not going to forget. I know I haven't. A perspective and picture that will help you understand why change is so hard and what it really takes. You still have to take action, but action's so much easier to take when a concept solidifies in your mind. So travel with me here, and I'll give you an analogy that I think will stick. If you enjoy the podcast, I do host two other podcasts, the True Life podcast. It's focused on getting you fully functioning so you aren't held back by your body and mind. You can join me and my co-host, Randy James, medical doctor and functional medicine expert, as we guide you to being at your full capacity. Then the Ziglar Show. It's aimed at inspiring your true performance in your personal and professional life. You can join me there as I bring on superstar guests and co-host a weekly Q&A show with Zig Ziglar's son and Ziglar CEO, Tom Ziglar. You can find all three of my shows. Just search for Kevin Miller in Apple Podcasts or visit my website at kevinmiller.co. In episode 33, I endeavored to present a more correct perspective to how we view changing ourselves and making ourselves become, quote, different people. And I feel overall it's an errant view, as we don't necessarily want to change who we are, but how we are. We simply want to change and upgrade some of our habits and behaviors and actions in order to realize new and better results. We aren't overall wrong or bad humans and needing to be totally different, but some of what we do is not best, or at least counterproductive to achieving some of what we want. So in May 24th, 2021 episode of The Ziglar Show, I had on the show renowned life coach Tommy Breedlove. So Tommy had a childhood he would describe as really dark. He was beaten and abused, and is often the case, he later turned into a beater and abuser. It landed him in jail at the age of 19. He somewhat reformed and came out to pursue business. And he had success in his work, but he cites he was still acting the same way, being a bully, just in his business instead of with fists. He finally came to rock bottom and found help that changed his paradigm on himself and his life. He left that darkness. Today, he's known for bringing much, much light to others. In his words, he is somewhat of a different person. But if you look at it, I mean, he still has, I mean, he looks the same. He looks very similar. You'd recognize him. He still has the same memories, right? From a personality style of being fairly aggressive and assertive, he's still somewhat like that. He's just applying himself differently. Dave Ramsey told me a long time ago, money is just a thing, like a brick. You probably heard that message too. You can use it for bad and beat somebody up with it, or you can build an orphanage with that brick. Well, Tommy's personality is not necessarily good or bad. It's how he applies it that matters through his perception. Now he aggressively and assertively applies himself to loving and serving and guiding people. You could say he's a different person, but at the core, he's still Tommy, but he is thinking and feeling and acting differently. So for the analogy that's about to come, he's dancing to a different tune, listening to different songs, dancing to a different tune, still him, but doing different things. So I'm going to take the task how to actually create change in what we do and how we do it. And again, there are volumes of books and papers written on how to actually change ourselves from the science aspect of it. Nudge by Richard Thaler, Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and more recently, Atomic Habits by James Clear. That thing is a bestseller extraordinaire at the top of the New York Times bestseller list right now. All of these contain incredible research on making actual change and changing your habits. And I highly recommend any or all of those. They've influenced and helped me greatly. So in deference to those and other resources, I'm not here to compete with them on their brilliant explanation and instruction, but to complement them, I believe, with an overall concept I think will help you embrace the essence of your efforts for change. The truth of the matter, it is one thing. Understanding it in a context that resonates with you and takes hold is another. You know that. So stick with me here for a moment. As an intro analogy to my primary analogy coming up. So I was a professional cyclist, and we're talking bicycles, right? Like the Tour de France, which just ended as of this recording. Uh, and the answer is, while I was privileged to race against many of the great riders who competed in the tour, I never competed in it. I was a very gifted cyclist. I earned my way into the pro ranks, and I take great credit for that accomplishment. Though amongst the pro peloton, I was a very mediocre and inconsistent competitor who squandered a lot of my opportunity. That's a story I'll share in my upcoming book and touch on here and there. Suffice it to say that for this podcast episode, though, I do know cycling. And you could read a great many books on the foundational pillars of cycling and becoming a good cyclist. But I'd offer you an overall concept in this way. Okay. Concept. That's what we're going to get to here on Change. That what sets cycling apart from any other sport is drafting, and the nuances of drafting boil much of cycling down to a chess game on wheels. It's not the strongest cyclist who wins necessarily, but the smartest. The race is won every bit as much by energy conservation and energy output and strategy. It was when I learned that the key to winning was saving energy in the draft as much as possible and saving reserve for the finish line that I experienced my greatest performances. It's a game of wits and timing and physics as much as strength and conditioning, maybe more so. So the concept should turn the idea of cycling on its head for many people, and from there requires drilling down into the details. But if you're looking at a sport, right, what you'd want to understand is the core concept of cycling, of bike racing. If you want a sport with great strategy and tactics and team playing, cycling's a fit. It's kind of like a ball sport and an endurance sport combined. If you simply want to compete based on who's the strongest, then CrossFit competitions and triathlons are a better fit. So it's my intent here and now to do the same thing for you with this topic of making literal changes in your habits, behaviors, and life outcomes to help you understand it through a core concept. Okay. So my great friend, business partner, and co-host of my True Life podcast is Randy James. He's a medical doctor. He's a functional medicine expert. As much of a reader as I've been in my life, books are my primary education outside of life experience. Randy has inspired me to read so many wonderful books that have greatly influenced my life. A recent one that he just really dogged me to read is called Finding Quiet by a guy named J.P. Moreland. Maybe I'll have him on the show. It's a tremendous book on one man addressing debilitating anxiety in his life. In the book, he makes a brief paragraph reference about, a quarter way into the book to our lives being like a CD, a compact disc with grooves dug into them. And it was this short piece that was really an epiphany for me and why I am bringing you this message now. For you younger generation, the digital natives, as you're called, CDs were made available to the public in around 1982. When I was 11 years old, though I didn't start converting to CDs from cassette tapes for music until about 1990. Apple started providing music via iTunes in 2001, and Spotify launched in 2008. I'm not sure when I stopped buying CDs and went to online streaming, but I'm a power user of Spotify today. And it's been many, many years, maybe a decade. I don't remember since I've touched a compact disc. But a CD, and for those watching the video, I should have pulled one out. I may have one somewhere around here. But a CD is simply a blank disc containing nothing until you put or burn grooves into it, such as music or documents. All the things that I now save to the cloud or stream, we used to download onto CDs. You could look at a CD and, just the right way and see how much of it had been used. It would start from the inside, the interior diameter, and come out. And you'd see these visible grooves inside that radiated again from this inside of the circle outward. And this is the crux of my big analogy here: to conceive of you and your life as a CD, that you begin as a blank CD. Okay. And you have grooves now in your CD, grooves that when queued up upon your waking every day, they play songs, they play tunes that you dance to unknowingly every day. the same tunes over and over. Tunes I'm not convinced you can ever erase or record over. They exist. I think to all eternity. You're stuck with them. You'll be relegated to listening just to them, dancing the same way to those same tunes every day of your life, unless you proactively find, download, and burn in new tunes, new files, tunes of your choosing, tunes that you can dance completely differently to. Same you, different dance. And while those old tunes still exist and will often automatically be queued up upon your waking for a long time, maybe forever. Okay. But if and only if you create new grooves with new tunes, if you'll do that proactively every day, you can skip over those old ones, be aware of them, skip over them, start dancing to those new ones. And maybe you'll get to the point where you almost forget the old songs. And upon waking, the new ones just kind of automatically start. That's the punchline. That's our opportunity. Just like cycling being set apart as a sport that is actually a chess game on wheels, made so by drafting and subsequential tactics. But you'll do well to, there's a punchline, but listen in, because I'm going to dig into some harsh truths. But it's understanding these that will help this message take root. And I think that if you're unaware of this kind of a concept, you have a lethal saboteur, in essence, robbing you of success in your efforts to make this change, create new tunes in your life, dance differently, and get the different outcomes that you want, that I want. So here's the deal, guys. When you were born, and again, I'm a messenger. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. This is stuff that I've been privileged to learn. A lot of it from this neurology standpoint has been with Randy James. So when you were born, you were not a blank CD. You did not come out of the womb. We like to think that we came out of the womb and boom, blank CD. You weren't. You already had grooves burned into you. They came from genetics, and they influence your mental and physical propensities right away. They're not definitives of who you are and going to be, but they're absolute propensities, predispositions in essence, good and bad. I mean, for instance, it's not an absolute that you're going to get diabetes or be a genius if that was part of your genetics, if that was wired into your parents and grandparents and their parents, right? But it is a propensity that a lot of people have grooves for, and we see that. A predisposition, again, that you then get to, by being, if you're aware, feed or starve with your life decisions. I've got a kid who is very predisposed to diabetes. So we alter her lifestyle in accordance with that to try to starve that propensity instead of feeding it. So if you want a good layman's look at how much credit or blame you should give to genetics, check out the March 11th, 2021 episode of my True Life podcast, where I talk through it with my co-host, Randy James, about how you should look at that, how much importance you should give. And it is importance, giving it importance, but not giving it so much power. You have the power. So boom, you're born, and the inner grooves of your CD already have grooves in them, positive and negative, healthy and unhealthy. I mean, the egg of your mother and fertilizer of your father came with baggage. And I'm going to keep saying this, those grooves and subsequent propensities you have much control over. You're not a full victim to. You can and will influence them with your life. But for the best hope of your personal success, you're well to understand this. Now, the next set of grooves are created from the moment you're conceived and during the 9 months of your gestation. Your essence exists from conception to birth, and you are being formed immediately. So was conception loving and consensual? What were the emotions that happened right then? Was it guilt or terror-laden? During the 9 months, what were the internal and external environmental factors of and for the mother? Was she at peace? Was she stressed? Was she nourished well, or was she on meth? Was she loved or abused? Was she joyful or depressed? Did any traumas happen? Did any great successes and joys happen? Everything that happened created grooves, good and bad, that were burned into her and into you before your skin ever felt the air of this world. And again, there are grooves that do not control and define you. I keep saying it, but they have a big impact, even more so if you're unaware. This is about awareness. Those grooves will deepen or shallow depending on how you feed them with your life. So before continuing, one more piece about your pre-birth past. In the Bible, Deuteronomy, it's 5:9 says, "For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity," a lot of translations say the sins of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation. Okay. And it actually says, "of those who hate me." Now, in my church upbringing and later into my adulthood in Christian men's group, this verse was often brought up that our sins would be passed down to our kids. And it was kind of a blanket statement. And then the way the traditional church really translates and use this, I'm going to say I'm in disagreement with, or they haven't convinced me. I do have great spiritual faith. I'm open to a spiritual essence of myself, even being transferred, to my kids. But check this out. In April 29th, 2021, in the episode of the True Life podcast, we had Tana Amen on the show. She is wife to renowned Dr. Daniel Amen. And the topic of our show was trauma, of which Tana had, she had a dramatic amount of trauma that she was exposed to in her upbringing and even into adulthood. And she shared research. This is medical scientific research, okay, showing the negative effects of trauma being passed down genetically in the window of 3 to 4 generations. Interesting relation. Now, she wasn't calling it inequities or sins or, again, the way that I was exposed to it in church. She's coming from a scientific level, but it's interesting. I like seeing different things from different realms that support each other. Here's what it meant to me. I've often looked at negative aspects of my own psyche, fears and weaknesses. And I spent a lot of my life looking at them and questioning, where the heck were those derived from? I don't remember any big tragic trauma in my childhood. There seemed so little to point to. And not for the sake of placing blame, but just to understand, because you really like to know where things came from, right? Where did that predisposition come from? So often just understanding the cause or origin of something helps us in overcoming it. It's not a requirement, but it helps. So with that Bible verse and Tana's scientific research, it opens up the possibility for me that I have some issues, some predispositions, some propensities from events I didn't personally experience. Maybe my parents didn't either. Both of my direct grandmothers experienced significant trauma and loss in their lives, and I think lived under significant fear. Both grandfathers I had, direct ones, led difficult lives. One was military and in, I think, a couple wars, and an alcoholic. He died from emphysema due to smoking, and I only met him a couple times. Little is known about their parents. So do I have some issues, some deficiencies, some wounds, some grooves from them? I think it's possible. And it helps me understand instead of being just bewildered, which for whatever reason helps me be more at peace with it and able to take it captive and work to overcome it. Again, you can take the concept, and if you accept it, and you can take the role of victim to it. Oh my gosh, it's, my parents' fault. It's their parents' fault, blah, blah, blah. But if you're fully responsible for dancing to that, you are. That's the thing. We are responsible. So that's a tune that was grooved into us. We're responsible whether we dance to it or create something new and better so we can skip over it and live from that point on. All right. So with all that said, now you're born, right? This is where we generally think our programming starts, but I hope I've done justice to you realizing that much of the programming's already happened not much, but a lot has. A lot has already happened. And from this point on, you're born, you come into the world, and you're exposed to everything. All you experience will already have some filters from those grooves you already had that you experience them by. But the formative grooves created by our upbringing into our young adulthood, of course, are profound. I think most of us know that. That's very tangible. The majority of the foundational grooves of our lives are created by all we're exposed to in our upbringing, in our formative years. And most of it's not our choosing, not in our control. mean, you didn't choose to be born a certain gender or race. You didn't choose to be raised in $1 million home or the ghetto. If you take two twins separated at birth, they'll have correlating propensities. But if one grows up in a home of a parent who's a doctor, there's a 20% chance they'll become a doctor and have a socioeconomic level as a result of that and experiences as a result of that. If the other twin grows up in the home of an addict, drug addict, there's a 53% chance they'll develop an addictive disorder and go down that path. I mean, it's an age-old discussion, right? Nature versus nurture. Are we who we are because of nature and genetics, or nurture and experience and exposure? And studies, and my point here is, of course, both, but I think we don't realize a lot of it that's grooved in. It's very important and necessary for our health to understand all these grooves that we have and our subsequent propensities for where we have the odds stacked in our favor and against our favor. I mean, imagine going into a cook-off. We watched one the other night, and to compete and be judged. And the event is going to give everyone different ingredients and different cooking appliances. Okay. And the food's not necessarily going to match the appliances. You may have bread baking ingredients, but no oven, or stir fry ingredients and no rice. I mean, wouldn't you want to know before going in what all you have before the event starts so you can prepare? And in doing so, you have a chance to win just as much as anyone else. Everyone can succeed. But if you go in unknowingly and unprepared, you're likely to be frustrated because you've got ingredients, right? This and this should go together to make this. And you probably won't create anything spectacular. I think that's where a lot of us end up in life, because we have these expectations. We don't understand why the math doesn't work, why the ingredients and the appliances don't work. But your childhood and upbringing happens, right? You are birthed and you leave home, and still there's very little of what you're exposed to that's of your choosing. If you're privileged, you have parents or caretakers who are devoted to you, and they know you and they consider you and how you are, and they cater to this. And a greater percentage of your upbringing is fitting to your nature. Sometime in your teens, you're going to come into a level of self-awareness. You're curious, confused, questioning, as your consciousness now deals with what you were dealt. Your own self-will and intellect ebb between battling and accepting the grooves you've been given. And you may rebel, you may excel, you may be depressed, you may have the time of your life. Ultimately, you're going to reach your mid-20s, and your prefrontal cortex solidifies, and your personality is now, if it's not touched, fairly set. How much of you at that point is natural? How much is programmed from your unchosen exposure to life? Science could guesstimate overall, but the exact answer is as unique as your fingerprint. And folks, that one boggles my mind, because I can look at myself, and you don't want to let this just throw you for a loop, but look at myself, and I don't know how much of me is natural, what was, intended to be, and what I was exposed to. But here's the big climax, I think. You now have a wide set of grooves in place, young adult, right? In place on this life CD, I'm calling it. And I want you to hear this. You have a wide set of grooves in place that, whether mostly good or bad, were not your choice. And my greatest use of CDs was burning music to listen to them. And imagine me filling part of a disc right from the inside out with 50 or 150 songs, whatever. Every day I wake up and that CD's playing. It's playing those songs, and I dance to them all day long. The songs could be upbeat, downbeat, folksy, heavy metal, classical. Again, I didn't necessarily choose the majority of them. They're familiar, and there's often familiar or comfort, in what is familiar. But there could also be terror attached to some of them. Either way, it's just all I know. If you've not seen the movie Truman, I really recommend it. Jim Carrey plays the lead role of Truman. And it's a guy whose world is pre-programmed and made up for him, and he doesn't know it. And this is what we're talking about. But we really are at a point in our life, we are Truman. We really can't not be. Not until the day, like in the movie, where he finds out and he realizes it's a world that he didn't necessarily choose. He didn't program it. Now, again, you may be privileged, and most of the grooves that you have in your life CD are great songs that give you life. They are authentic to you. And the people, again, in an authority in your life helped you with awareness, and you chose more of your grooves and songs. But I honestly don't believe anyone is so privileged that they don't need to stop and take account of what has been grooved into their life CD and just question it. Question it and be able to own it, agree with it. You decide what you agree with. Even take the good stuff and just make sure it's on your terms, your decisions, your belief, your faith. Most of us, most of humanity, we come into adulthood with a background and some school. We pick a job, a life direction based on a life CD, playing songs, grooved in songs that we didn't primarily choose. And generally, nobody ever even mentions it. And we don't know any better. How could we? If we want to make actual change in our lives, we must burn in new music, new grooves, new files, in the form of new information and perspectives that we agree with, we decide to put faith in, and we start proactively playing over and over and over to groove them in. We've got to create new tunes and proactively skip to those, the ones we want, we choose, we desire, we agree with every morning. And when the old ones start playing automatically, we skip ahead. This is our requirement and our opportunity. Listen to that again. Let me break that down. You must take in new information and knowledge. Now, as you're listening here to this show, I can assume that you do that. You take in new information and knowledge. I do too. A lot. It's easy and even enjoyable to take in new information and knowledge, new podcasts, new books, new articles and blogs, new speakers delivering a new message. It inspires and motivates us. But I mean, I enjoy a new movie in the same way also. And I'm amazed how I can find myself the next day trying to remember the key junctures and points of the movie. My kids will be talking about it. Gosh, I hardly remember that. Honestly, I would really just like to watch a new movie. It's just more entertaining. So for any of the new info and knowledge we want to take into effect, we have to play it again and again and again to burn in a new groove. It requires our focus, our attention, repetition, which means work. And there's where we so often drop off. We just want to go to the next new thing. It's entertaining. I mean, if you search for, I just did this while I was writing this. If you search for brainwashing, you'll find top tactics. One of the first ones listed I saw was chanting and singing for brainwashing. Okay. What is that? Repetition. Isolation, the next big one. What's that? Focus, attention. Dependency and fear is a great brainwashing tactic. To me, that addresses the faith aspect that I need to decide. I want to be dependent on new information, new knowledge, a new song. I want to be dependent on it. And I fear staying back here with this old one and reverting back to it. Okay. I get that. Brainwashing. I mean, I don't know if I could be a bigger fan of music. I adore music. I feel it's one of my greatest allies in helping me with my mood, my motivation, my joy. And, old songs, who doesn't have some old songs that they just adore? They're comfortable, maybe nostalgic. But I keep a steady diet of new music coming in, and I listen to pretty new music, probably 75% of the time. And the cycle for me goes, one, a new song, I hear it, I like that sound, I save it to my Spotify playlist, so it goes right to the top. Later that day, I'll hit the playlist as I'm getting in the car or whatever, I'll listen to it again. But it's not really till the third or fourth time that, man, it gels. I am digging this song. Or I think, no, it sounded good, but I'm not digging it. And I delete it. If I like it, I'll likely listen to it 15 times, 20 times. And if it's a really good one, who knows? Over and over for 100 times over a lifetime. And this is what we're talking about now for new grooves and new tunes. You have to add them to the top of your playlist, ahead of the old ones, and listen to them over and over and over. And I want to impress on you that many, many people, even those taking in lots of new information and knowledge, wake up every morning, listening to the same old songs, dancing the same old way, and they never, ever change. They don't make the change they even would really like to make. You've got to burn the new songs in and choose them every day and expect that you're going to, no matter what, you're going to likely wake up in the morning. This is being pessimistic, but being, I think, realistic. Expect you're going to wake up to some old songs playing, songs that are burned into you before you maybe were even conceived. Songs that, again, not of your choosing. They're burned into you through an upbringing you didn't choose, and you didn't question them much. Who knew how to? Who knew why to? And maybe you still haven't questioned them. Now it's high time to. So you got to wake every morning to a trigger that reminds you, wait a minute. There's that old song. Skip forward to a new song. There's that new song that I want to play and dance to. Take that new information and knowledge, write it down, put it in your journal that you read every morning, put it on flashcards that you keep nearby, on your bathroom mirror or the rear view mirror of your car, or literally just, take some time and repeat the message over and over. Replay the podcast, reread the page of the chapter, repeat the audio, rewatch the video over and over and over till it sticks. We're in an age where there is never, ever any need for repeats. You can have something new that you'll likely enjoy nearly endlessly. And that's a shallow appetite that you've got to say wait to as you work to feed a deeper and much more satisfying appetite. This is why age does not, even age and exposure does not automatically equate to wisdom and change, but can merely just be the passing of time. So Robin Sharma, I had him on a show once. He's the author of the 5 a.m. Club, really renowned coach and guide. And he said, don't live the same year 75 times and call it a life. That's just so profound. Don't live the same year 75 times and call it a life. The passing of time and even new experiences do not by proxy create new grooves. You can go from age 20 to age 90, be exposed to an infinite amount of new things, but never groove in anything new. And you keep dancing the same way to the same tunes that you did as 20, and now you're 90. You're just dancing a little slower, right? And that sounds bad, but I've seen it. I've seen older people who are wise. They have learned and grown and changed. And I've seen older people that never really got much further past their 20 age maturity. And they just kept repeating the same life over and over and over. I used to work with a guy and he listened to classic rock every single day. The same songs he'd been listening to for 30 years. He listened to them every single day. I like classic rock once in a while, but at some point it's just the same song I've listened to. There's nothing so great that I want it every day. I really like sushi. I don't want it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And the next day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And the next day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Nobody does. We know that. But we'll tend to do that in our lives, get in a rut that we think is good. Maybe it's comfortable, and we just do it over and over and over. And we don't stretch ourselves. We don't grow. So our choice is to remain in the initial unchosen grooves and live the rest of our lives listening to those same tunes. We have nothing else to go to. Or go create new intentional grooves that we choose to listen to, we agree with, we desire, and we want to dance to, and we dance differently and we get different results. So here's a question on that. It comes to mind when we're talking this way. Can you destroy the old grooves? I started off talking about this. I'm going to come back to it now. Can you destroy the old grooves, or can you overwrite them in essence? Or if not, can you just choose to not ever listen to them again and only tune in to the new songs of your choice? I don't know that anybody can say definitely what the answer is there. What we can say with assurance is that creating new grooves of our choosing is the best opportunity to change and grow for the better and experience a life of joy and peace and fulfillment. Any of us at any moment are going to wake up and find ourselves hearing an old song from an old groove and automatically start dancing to it, no matter how many new grooves we've created. But if there are no new grooves to jump to that play a better song, we're just stuck back here. If new grooves and songs of life and truth exist, there's the opportunity to switch channels immediately. And over time, I think it does become automatic. It can become automatic. And maybe you'll even forget the old grooves and be hearing and dancing to the new grooves will be kind of seamless. Again, I'm theorizing here, folks. Maybe you can really get rid of those old grooves, but I think about Alcoholics Anonymous, where they say, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I don't really want to believe that. I even used to kick against that as far as God, to say that takes away God's power. But in my experience of life, myself and others, I have some understanding of once you have a groove in there, it's there, but you can create a new groove. I am not sure also what's more difficult, being older and having been listening to the same tunes, the same grooves for a long time, or is it the depth of the burned in groove that matters? I mean, trauma comes in all shapes and sizes. I'm daddy to a young girl who experienced a lot of trauma in her first 4 years of life. She's only 8 now, but double that. So she's been with us out of a harsh lifestyle for more than half her life. But my gosh, those traumatic grooves are so deep. And I fear it's not the length of time she's had those grooves and listened to those songs that made her dance certain ways, that it's the depth of them. And it's just going to take more than just time for her to crawl out of them. It's going to take awareness that she doesn't have yet. It's going to take brainwashing, in essence, rewiring. It's going to take understanding and conscientious faith to crawl out of those that she's not yet capable of. So my hope for you and me from this episode of What Drives You of this podcast is that you'll realize that tomorrow morning, you're likely going to wake up. Well, no, you are. You're going to wake up and you've got what grooves and songs you've got. That's it. That's what you got. And you're going to automatically dance those. You can't dance anything else. They're grooved into your life CD. That's what you got. You're not going to dance any differently. And if you want different results, you need to, until you burn in new songs through intake, exposure, a decision that, yes, I want that, faith, saying, I believe that will help me. And then boom, repetition over and over and over. And that's what I don't like. I want new. I don't want to repeat, but I want that new groove. So I've got to. So you'll expose yourself to new information and knowledge. You'll decide you want to embrace it for yourself. You'll place faith and desire and the need for it. And then you'll repeat the exposure over and over. You'll listen again. You'll take notes. You'll write it down. You'll reread it. You'll memorize it. You'll be aware of the old song that is counter to this, to the new one, that will trigger you to stop the old song, skip ahead to the new song. And little by little, you'll dance differently. You'll thoughtfully respond instead of automatically react, and you'll begin getting different results. And again, it's not fair because those old grooves, you didn't make a big effort. You spent a lot of time, investment, not of your choosing, but being exposed to those, and they were grooved into you. Now you've got to take the reins and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now I've got to do the proactive, intentional, individual work to create new grooves. And it's just not easy. And we'll often likely, I think, miss the comfort or at least just the ease of the old songs, even if the dance that we did to them didn't produce the life results that we want. You'll invariably find these old songs competing in volume sometimes, or starting out of the blue. And you can just expect that and be aware, hit stop, and create or skip ahead to the new song and the new dance. Well, folks, coming up next in episode 35, we're going to continue to talk about change. Of course, I have special guest, Dr. Maya Shankar. Maya is a cognitive scientist who served as senior advisor in the Obama White House, where she founded and served as chair of the White House behavioral science team. So she just launched a new podcast on Malcolm Gladwell's Pushkin platform, and it's called A Slight Change of Plans. Her focus is just this topic, change. So I hit her up with some big picture questions regarding how and why we change. And she just brings real world testimonies and research on individual and institutional level change. Folks, thank you for tuning in to the What Drives You podcast. I'm Kevin Miller. I'm honored to walk with you as we discover and clarify what is driving us, and we become masters of our drives so we can steer ourselves to what we truly want from life. If you get value from the show, I'd ask you to subscribe, leave a review in Apple Podcasts. And if you join my email list, which you'll find at kevinmiller.co, we send out every week just a real brief email giving you the headlines and a short description of all the podcasts from the week. And I'm generally producing 4 or 5. So till then, friends, thank you and stay driven.